Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to round 2 coverage of my games from the 2019 Southern California Open. So round 2 was held Saturday afternoon. I had a kind of up and down game Saturday morning, but I ended up the game winning and I felt pretty good about it. It's nice to get a wake-up call like that. You make a few mistakes, but you recover from them and end up winning the game. So I was feeling pretty good. Coming into round 2, my opponent in round 2 was another youngster, actually another player rated 1699, so another player playing up, and my rating was 1837 for this tournament. It's a bit strange in the A section to be paired down in the first round with a rating like 1837. You'd expect to be paired up. But after you win that first round game, you certainly expect to be paired up in the second round, because the second round you're matched against the other winners, so you expect them to mostly be the higher rated players. But yes, once again, I was paired down against a youngster. So she started off with e4. I played c5. Sometimes I play e5, but and that's one of my more solid defenses. But against kids, the kids all know the e5 lines, e4, e5 lines pretty well. So I fall back on my second choice defense here, which is the Sicilian, and I'm very comfortable playing this. So she continues knight f3, go d6, d4. We get a main line, open Sicilian. And I go for the classical Sicilian as usual. That's with knight to c6 here. And she plays bishop c4, the Fischer-Sozin attack. So a very interesting and aggressive way for white to play. So I played e6. She castled here. Let's back up. This is an interesting move. Sorry, didn't mean to back up that far. Right here, let's see. Just to restore the context, she played bishop c4. That's establishing the type of opening, and I played e6, the main response. So white has a number of choices. Sozin would play with castling queenside, so that line might go like this. Bishop here, bishop e7. I think this is still the most popular way of playing this position. Queen e2, defending the bishop, and well, that's not the main point. I think the main point is keeping an eye on this square so the knight can't come in and harass the bishop, and opening up the d file for a rook. Let's see, a6, castles queenside, and queen c7, and play can continue from here. Black will castle kingside and also bring a rook to the d file to oppose this rook, and it's an interesting double-edged position. Bobby Fischer, when he played this, he also played with castling kingside, as my opponent did in this game, but he would retreat the bishop first. He'd put the bishop here on b3, so it was out of trouble. Anyway, she castled immediately. We're still in the opening book, so nothing has gone wrong here yet. I play bishop e7, and here she plays f4. Also still in the opening book, although this is a very rare line. At this point, the most common move is once again to play bishop e3, and continuing to rely on the fact that I can't play knight to g4. The queen covers it, and this diagonal is not open. So f4 is an interesting move, and she thought for a long time before playing it, and I thought for a long time before responding. So if you want to think some yourself, you're black here, your opponent has just played f4. What are the possibilities you should consider, and what do you think the best move is here? Okay, I'm going to give the answer away now in stages, but pause the video if you want some more time to think about this position. It's pretty interesting. The first move I thought about was queen b6. I think this is pretty natural, and maybe this is what she was thinking about as well. This is a loose knight here now. It's under attack, and if you defend with bishop e3, you can snag a pawn like this. Queen takes b2. But this is a bit chancy. This knight comes to b5, blocking the queen's escape. And now you see this bishop defending the a pawn. The queen's defending the c pawn. The knight is covering these squares. So there's actually a direct threat of rook to b1 trapping the queen. The queen has no squares. The knight's defended. These squares are defended, and the rook will take away all the squares here. So that's a pretty dangerous threat. You have to retreat the queen right now, And then the line might continue like this. Knight to c7 check. It was kind of a double threat, that knight b5 move. It was threatening to trap the queen, and then also threatening to win the exchange here. So this, although the chess engine thinks this is playable somehow, maybe because this knight gets trapped, that I did get a pawn for the exchange, it looks pretty risky to me. I would not like to play this way. So anyway, yeah, I thought about this during the game, and actually I was aware of this knight to b5 trick. So I had that in mind, and I after thinking about that move, I rejected it. So the best move here is to play d5. I don't know if you guys thought about this. This, for some reason, I didn't think about this move at all, but it's a very logical move. It takes advantage of the fact that white has not retreated that bishop. I guess this is why Fischer used to retreat the bishop first before castling, so we could immediately get in that f4 move in the attack. Anyway, because of this, white needs to do something active here. The chess engine gives this line, actually. Knight takes, threatening the queen, pawn takes, and bishop back to d3. But this looks pretty comfortable for black. So this seems to be an equalizing line. So if we go back to this position, I have no idea what my opponent was thinking, whether she was thinking about tactical lines with queen b6, or if she was thinking about this kind of more logical central play with d5. But in either case, this is what she decided to play. And so it is a slight mistake, because d5 here would allow me to pretty much equalize. It's not like it's a losing move. It's just a slight inaccuracy. But unfortunately, I didn't play d5. I had rejected queen b6, and I didn't think about d5 at all, and I just fell back on the normal moves in the Sicilian. I played a6 here. And here she went king h1, getting rid of those queen b6 ideas. I went queen to c7. So we get some normal moves, but white has kept the opening advantage. Here she goes bishop to b3, I castle. And white pushes on with f5. So I go ahead and take this knight off. Things are getting a bit dangerous here. I can't just ignore the threats to e6, because the knight and the bishop are coordinating on that square as well as the pawn. So I trade off this knight first. So that's a good move. And then right here, I need to improve. I played the move e5 to kind of shut things down. I wanted to shut down white's attacks and try and get some counterplay going on the queen side. And so I tried to do that by pushing e5 and keeping these lines closed. But that kind of backfired on me. So let's see what I should have played here. One option is b5. And actually, we're still in the opening book. So this is, it's kind of a rare sideline in the opening book, but this has been played before. So b5 here. And if white takes at this point, now that I've traded off the knight, it's not as dangerous. I can take back with the bishop. And white probably doesn't want to trade off the bishop again and give me two pawns at the center. So just developing with bishop g5. This seems to be playable for black, although white has that opening advantage and a pretty dangerous looking attack to me. I don't like this open. I don't like that open f file on my rook there, but it seems that black can defend this position. And as I said, this has been played before. And the other move that has been played at this position is e takes f5. Maybe I would have gone for this one if I had known how my move would backfire. I like this because it keeps the f file closed. The downside of this one is it leaves me with this backwards. Well, it's not backwards. It's an isolated pawn. But it's in my camp, so it's fairly easy to defend at the moment, and maybe I can push it forward and get the typical kind of isolated queen pawn play later. So I think in the same position, that's probably what I would play next time. Of course, I'd be better off not getting into this position, which I could have done by playing that e5 when f4 was first played. But anyway, we're past that point now. So white pushed on with f5, and I took off the knight. White took back, and I played e5. So now white's opening advantage has started to increase, and I'm kind of on the edge here. Let's see. The queen dropped back to d3. I played b5. But, well, you know, you're often on the edge of the Sicilian, and I did manage to slow down the attack here. Bishop g5. But now there are some other ideas in the position revolving around the d5 square. Played bishop to b7, and I was expecting these trades. Bishop takes, but what I was expecting was knight here next. And instead my opponent played the much stronger move, bishop d5. The point is that after the trade of these light squared bishops, white will have a knight on d5 that is almost impossible for me to get rid of. I'll only have a dark squared bishop. So this is actually a good position for white. I mean, probably winning with good play. White will get some kind of advantage out of it. And let's see, I didn't react in the best way here either. I made a slight mistake in playing rook a to c1. But other lines lead to trouble too. So rook a, b1, c8 and b8. Rook a to b8 was a suggestion of the chess engine. And after this, take with a rook, knight d5, and drop the queen back to d8 to defend the bishop. But yeah, it's a pretty awful looking position. Maybe it's the best I can hope for. I've already gotten to a situation where that's probably the best I can do. Another try would be something like bishop g5, getting the knight away from, getting my bishop away from the knight when it comes to d5. But this does look a little bit loose. Anyway, the line given by the chess engine goes like this: b3, rook a to c8, bishop takes b7, queen takes b7, and knight d5. So a similar kind of position, but with my rook here and my queen here instead of on d8. Anyway, both those positions are pretty good for white, and maybe winning with good technical play. I played rook a c8, and that's a mistake, not because it leads to a worse position, but just because I overlooked the fact that she could take here and then just capture a pawn. So I've just sacrificed a pawn, and it was unintentional. So that's why I call that a mistake. Although it turns out that if white were to take that pawn, I do get compensation. I can play my other rook over. I've got all my pieces in the game now, and the queen doesn't have so many good squares to run to. Can run back to this square, and now I can lift these rooks up, maybe get pressure on this pawn, maybe sack the exchange here against this knight. So there's play in the position for black, and in fact the chess engine rates this as nearly equal. So taking that pawn would be a mistake, and my opponent didn't take it. She played knight d5, which is the stronger move. It was kind of interesting. So I mentioned that before white played f4, she spent a long time thinking about it, but here she played this move instantly. So I don't know if she just overlooked the fact that a pawn was hanging, or if she had already calculated out in advance and decided that that the knight here was worth more than the pawn, and especially since the queen gets chased around. So, but however she came up with that decision, she played it almost instantly, and it was the correct move. So let's see, I tried queen c6 here. Maybe at this point, I already have to start worrying about the attack. The attack comes very quickly now. Even though the F file is closed, there's still the G file and the H file. The chess engine is recommending king to h8 immediately, allowing the knight to take off the bishop and then opening up the G file and trying to get something on it quickly. Anyway, I started with queen c6. Instead of king h8, I played queen c6. And she played queen g3 with a threat. This pins the pawn, so the knight will just win the bishop. So I played king h8 now, a move later. And she took a move to play c3, defending that pawn before continuing with the attack. So I'm looking for counterplay on the queen side here. I thought, well, white can take off the bishop. I can bring a rook over to the g file. It seemed to me I could sort of defend, but there's some there's some problems with that idea. We'll get to it. So anyway, I was looking to get counterplay on the queen side. I went with a5. I would have pushed b4 immediately, but the knight was covering that. So I want to push b4 and create some weaknesses over here. So white lifted up the rook to f3, and I went queen to c4. At this point, I had recognized how dangerous the attack was, and I was actually preparing to sack the exchange, lift the rook up and just take it. I was going to try and win a knight and a pawn for the rook. And before I played queen to c4, I also noticed that after queen c4, the knight can come there and fork the queen and the rook, which normally you would avoid. But in this case, I would grab the pawn, and then after the exchange, I was planning to sacrifice the exchange anyway, so it's just another way of sacrificing the exchange. So after thinking for quite a long time, I decided to go ahead and play queen c4 anyway. And now my opponent spent the longest amount of time thinking during the game. She thought for about half an hour. I think, this is a very tempting move to play. So she had to decide, do I want to go for the material or do I want to go for the attack? And so you need to calculate ahead far enough to make sure the attack is winning, and if you have time. If you don't have time, you might play the attacking move instinctually. But if you have time to think about it, you really should carefully evaluate those alternatives, grabbing the material or continuing the attack. And after about a half an hour of thought, she decided to take the bishop, and that was the correct decision. If we look at the other line, knight to b6, I would have taken the pawn over here. Knight takes, rook takes. I have some ideas here. I have an extra pawn on this side of the board. I have a strong bishop now looking at this diagonal. And, I have chances in this game. That white is still better, but maybe I can get enough going on the queen side to generate some counterplay here and turn the game around. So anyway, it was a correct decision here to take on f6. I took with the pawn, and now queen h4 and rook to g8. I need to get my rook over to the g file. There's this threat of the rook coming here and just winning on h7. But the problem with this position is that the f pawn is hanging here, and she just takes it. I block, and at the same time I defend here. So I'm still hanging on for the moment, but it's a bit dicey. Rook to g3, piling up on my pinned rook. I bring this over, and now she continued the attack with h4. Actually, the most accurate move here is rook to e1. And what this does is this eliminates one of my defensive ideas and is just winning for white. So that's the strongest way to continue. To show you what the defensive idea was, after h4, I could have played queen to e2. And this kind of holds on for a minute. I'm slowing down the advance of the pawn. Let's see. And there are potential counter threats on the g file here. So this rook can't easily go over to the h file and start pushing that pawn forward. So white responds. This is a computer line. White responds with rook to g1. Then I can play h5 to just stop that pawn from advancing. Now it's defended by my queen. And let's see, white can play queen h6 check. I block with the rook, and then the queen can drop back to e3. And this will lead to an exchange. If I move my queen away, like queen to c4, then white just crashes through. I guess I can show that. Queen c4, rook takes, king takes, and f6, taking away some flight squares of my king. And there's actually just also the rook can no longer come to g7, and there's just a winning attack for white there. So in this position, after queen to e3, I'm forced to trade. And after rook takes, I can bring this rook back. But, well, this is a winning position for white. It's, let's see, let's count the pawns. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, white is a pawn up. But the attack is gone. And maybe I have chances in this endgame. So although it's technically winning, it's an endgame with double rooks, and it's not so easy for white to play. So that defensive move of queen e2 would have allowed me to stay in the game. And yeah, I didn't spot that idea. I thought I needed to get my queen over to help defend. I didn't realize it was that immediate, but I played queen takes e4, getting my queen over closer to the king side, and now it's just game over. And white plays the next part of this game very excellently. Well, the whole game she played well, I have to say. h5 was played with a pretty big threat of h6, so that's what queen e2 would have prevented. I went with queen f4 here, trying to slow things down, but well, first white exchanges the rook, then pushes on with h6. I try for some counterplay with queen to g5. Actually, I'd realized already I was losing, but I just was going to play it out. So white takes, I take back, white takes, and I resigned at this point. White is a whole rook up, so there was nothing going. And white ignored all of my threats because even though there's a mate threat there, all these moves come with check, and there was really nothing I could do about it. If I move my king in front of the pawn, then my queen is hanging. So that was all completely forced. And at this point, yeah, I didn't actually take the queen. I just resigned at this point. So a very nice game by white. I have to say that she was playing well above her rating. And in fact, she won 4 games out of 6. She had 4 wins and she had 2 losses in this tournament, playing all stronger players. Her rating was up over 1,800 by the end of the tournament. I don't have the exact number written down, but she gained about 100 rating points in this tournament. Her pre-tournament rating, well, like I said, her rating for the pairings was 1699, but she had played in one tournament previously and had gotten up to 1716. And then after this tournament, her rating is over 1,800. So, and well-deserved. She played a really excellent game here. If you think about it, she didn't really make a single mistake. The move f4, which I talked about at the beginning, it lets me equalize. It's not really a mistake in the sense of giving me an advantage. It's just an interesting way to play where it gave me some equality if I knew how to play it. And then there was that one move, rook e1, which would have been more accurate in the attack, preventing me from playing queen e2. But she was still winning in that position, and I didn't find the queen e2 move anyway. So my play was not bad either. I mean, I think I found some ideas. I was just outplayed. She was definitely the stronger player there. So that's it for round 2. Stay tuned for coverage of round 3 coming up.